3 months before the ribbon-cutting ceremony, I stood in the rain at my father's funeral. The droplets mingled with my tears as they lowered his casket into the ground. Dad had been my rock, my confidant, my hero, a master carpenter who built his life and his dreams with the same careful precision he applied to his craft. "He would have hated this weather," whispered Aunt Margaret, squeezing my hand. I nodded, unable to speak. Dad always said rain on a funeral meant the heavens were weeping too. The thought brought no comfort. After the service, Marcus Lee, Dad's attorney and friend for 30 years, approached me with a leather portfolio tucked under his arm. His kind eyes showed more than professional sympathy. "Olivia, when you're ready, we need to discuss your father's estate," he said gently. "Nothing urgent. Take your time." 2 days later, I sat in Marcus's wood-paneled office, still numb with grief. "Your father was meticulous," Marcus explained, spreading documents across his desk. "The house in town goes to your sister. His savings are split between you two, and Clearwater Lodge." He paused, tapping a photograph of a rustic villa nestled against a backdrop of pine, trees, and crystalline water, "is yours alone." I took the photo with trembling hands. Clearwater Lodge. Dad had built it himself over 5 summers, a labor of love and determination. It was his sanctuary and in my childhood our special place together. "He wanted you to have it because you understood what it meant to him," Marcus continued. "It's completely paid for, taxes current. No mortgage, no liens." "Thank you," I whispered, clutching the photo. "I'll take care of it, I promise." The following weekend, I made the 2-hour drive to Clearwater. The gravel road leading to the property was just as I remembered, winding through thick forest before opening to reveal the lodge perched on a gentle slope above the water. The key felt heavy in my hand as I unlocked the door. Inside, everything was exactly as Dad had left it. His reading chair by the stone fireplace, his collection of woodworking books on the shelves he'd crafted, his jacket still hanging by the door, as if he might walk in any moment. I ran my fingers along the kitchen counter, remembering how he'd described selecting and cutting every piece of wood, how he'd shown me the grain patterns and taught me what they meant. "This is history in your hands, Livy," he'd say. "Trees tell stories if you listen." That night, I slept in the loft bedroom with its panoramic windows overlooking the lake. Under a blanket of stars, I made a silent vow to preserve this place, to honor Dad's legacy. Monday morning dragged me back to reality, and to Whitman Enterprises, where I'd worked as a marketing coordinator for 3 years. I'd always been good at my job, respected by colleagues, but constantly undermined by my boss, Richard Vaughn. Richard was in his late 40s, with the practiced charm of a man who'd climbed the corporate ladder by stepping on others. As marketing director, he had a talent for claiming credit for his team's work, while deflecting blame for any failures. "Olivia, my office now." He barked across the open workspace the moment I arrived. I followed him into his corner office with its panoramic view of downtown. He didn't offer me a seat. "The Hendrickson campaign is faltering," he stated flatly. "What are you doing about it?" The accusation was unfair. The Hendrickson account was Travis's responsibility, not mine, and Richard knew it. "I believe Travis is handling that account," I replied carefully. Richard waved his hand dismissively. "Travis is overwhelmed. I need you to fix it. I want a complete revision of the strategy by Wednesday. But I'm already managing 3 major accounts. Are you refusing an assignment?" His voice had that dangerous edge I'd come to recognize. "No," I conceded. "I'll handle it." He nodded, already turning to his computer, dismissing me. "Close the door on your way out." That was Richard's management style. Impossible demands, shifting responsibilities, constant pressure. The office joke was that he didn't have blood in his veins, just iced coffee and ambition. For the next 2 weeks, I buried myself in work, barely coming up for air. The Hendrickson campaign revision, my regular accounts, and grief exhausted me. The only bright spot was planning weekend trips to Clearwater, where I could breathe freely and feel close to Dad. Then came the email that changed everything. From Richard Vaughn to all staff, subject, exciting company development team. I'm pleased to announce that Whitman Enterprises will soon have its own executive retreat facility. Clearwater Lodge, a stunning lakeside property I've acquired, will serve as our new venue for leadership summits, client meetings, and team-building events. Renovations begin next month. The grand opening is scheduled for July 15th. This strategic acquisition reflects our company's growth and commitment to excellence. Richard Vaughn, Marketing Director, Whitman Enterprises. I stared at my screen in disbelief, reading the message 3 times before its meaning fully registered. Richard was claiming my father's lodge, my inheritance, as his own acquisition. It had to be a mistake. Perhaps there was another Clearwater Lodge somewhere. But the photo attached to the email crushed that hope. It was undeniably my father's property, my property. My hands shook as I forwarded the email to my personal account and then picked up my phone to call Marcus. Before I could dial, a notification popped up for a company-wide meeting in 15 minutes. In the conference room, Richard stood at the head of the table, beaming with self-satisfaction as colleagues filed in. A projector displayed photos of Clearwater Lodge on the wall behind him. As you've read in my email, he began once everyone was seated, Whitman Enterprises is expanding its assets with a premium retreat location. He clicked through slides showing the lodge, the lake, the surroundings, my inheritance, my sanctuary, my father's legacy, all presented as his business achievement. Richard, I interrupted, unable to contain myself any longer. There must be some confusion. Clearwater Lodge belongs to me. It was my father's property, and he left it to me when he passed away last month. The room fell silent. All eyes darted between Richard and me. Richard's smile didn't falter, but something cold flashed in his eyes. Olivia, I understand you have emotional attachments to the place, but the ownership situation is complicated. We can discuss this privately later. There's nothing to discuss, I insisted, heat rising to my face. I have the deed and title. The property is mine. Later. Olivia, Richard repeated, his tone making it clear the conversation was over. Now, as I was saying about our new corporate retreat, he continued his presentation as if I hadn't spoken, outlining renovation plans that would strip away everything that made Clearwater special. The handcrafted woodwork would be replaced with modern amenities. The peaceful surroundings would be landscaped for optimal use of space. Each word felt like a personal attack, not just on my property rights, but on my father's memory and legacy. After the meeting, Richard cornered me in the hallway, his public smile replaced by a stern glare. That was unprofessional, Olivia. If you have concerns about the lodge, my door is always open, but challenging me in front of the team crosses a line. What crosses a line is claiming ownership of property that isn't yours, I countered, fighting to keep my voice steady. Richard sighed as if dealing with a difficult child. Look, I understand your father's death has been hard on you, but business is business. The company needs this facility and I've made arrangements to secure it. Your attachment is clouding your judgment. Arrangements? What? Arrangements could possibly override my legal ownership? A smug smile tugged at his lips. Be grateful, Olivia. Your father's old house is finally serving a real purpose. You should thank me for giving it meaning. With that, he walked away, leaving me stunned in the hallway, clutching my folder of market research like a shield. That night, I called Marcus and told him everything. His response was immediate and reassuring. He has no legal claim, Olivia. None whatsoever. The property is yours, free and clear. Whatever arrangements he thinks he's made are fantasy or fraud. Then why is he so confident? Marcus paused. Some people believe their power in one sphere extends to all aspects of life. Let me handle this legally. In the meantime, document everything. I ended the call, feeling marginally better but still shaken. How had my quiet grief over losing Dad evolved into this bizarre property battle with my boss? Little did I know, Richard's audacity was just beginning, and the true test of my resolve was yet to come. The next morning, I drove to Clearwater Lodge after work, needing to see it, to reassure myself it was still mine. As I turned onto the gravel road, a large truck blocked my path. 2 men in work uniforms were unloading equipment near the entrance. Excuse me, I called out, approaching them. What's going on here? Setting up security system for the new corporate place, one answered. You with Whitman Enterprises? My stomach twisted. I'm the owner of this property. Who authorized this work? The men exchanged glances. One pulled out a work order. Mr. Vaughn approved this yesterday. We're installing cameras and changing the locks. Changing the locks? You can't do that. This is my property. Look, lady, we just do what the paperwork says, the second man replied. Take it up with your boss. I stood there, watching helplessly as they continued unloading equipment. When I tried to use my key on the front door, it no longer worked. They had already changed the main lock. Humiliated and furious, I called Marcus from my car. He's changed the locks, Marcus. He's locked me out of my own property. That's illegal entry and modification. We'll file for an injunction first thing tomorrow. Marcus assured me. Take photos of everything they're doing, but don't confront them further. We'll handle this legally. I spent the next hour documenting the workers' activities from my car, fighting back tears of frustration. This wasn't just about property anymore. It was about my father's legacy, my memories, and my right to grieve in peace. When I returned to the office the next day, Richard was parading his acquisition to anyone who would listen. He'd set up a slideshow of Clearwater Lodge on the digital display in the reception area, with future home of Whitman leadership excellence emblazoned across each image. Colleagues gave me sympathetic looks, but said nothing. In our competitive corporate culture, few were willing to challenge Richard directly. At my desk, I found an invitation in my email inbox. From Richard Vaughn. To all staff. Subject: Grand Opening, Clearwater Corporate Retreat. Mark your calendars. For July 15th, join us for the ribbon-cutting ceremony at our new Clearwater Corporate Retreat. Press, local officials, and key clients will be in attendance. This exclusive event will showcase Whitman's continued expansion and commitment to excellence. Formal invitations to follow. Richard Vaughn, Marketing Director, Whitman Enterprises. The audacity was breathtaking. I forwarded the email to Marcus, who called me immediately. Perfect, he said, surprising me. This gives us exactly what we need. How is this perfect? He's planning a public event at my property. Because we now have a specific event to target with our legal action. I've already filed for an emergency injunction, but this gives us a concrete deadline. More importantly, it gives us a stage. I wasn't following. A stage? Olivia, if Richard wants public recognition, we'll give him public recognition, just not the kind he's expecting. Marcus's plan was bold. Rather than fighting the ribbon cutting, we would let it proceed, with one significant modification. Judge Elizabeth Monroe, who had already reviewed our case and granted the injunction, would attend personally to deliver the ruling. Why not just stop the event entirely? I asked. Because that gives Richard time to spin the narrative. He'll claim it's a minor legal hiccup, that you're being difficult. But if we let him set the stage and then reveal the truth in front of everyone he's trying to impress, that's the kind of lesson that sticks. The strategy made me uncomfortable. Isn't that vindictive? It's justice, Marcus countered. He's trying to steal your inheritance and your father's legacy. He's locked you out of your own property and undermined you professionally. This isn't about revenge. It's about truth coming to light. In the weeks that followed, Richard's behavior became increasingly unbearable. He assigned me the most tedious projects, excluded me from important meetings, and constantly made snide remarks about people who can't see the big picture. One afternoon, he caught me alone in the break room. Don't worry, Olivia. We'll save you a bunk bed when you finally learn what success looks like, he said with a smirk. Maybe you'll even thank me someday for turning that dusty old cabin into something valuable. I clutched my coffee mug so tightly I feared it might shatter. My father built that dusty old cabin with his own hands. Every beam, every floorboard has his craftsmanship in it. And now it will have my vision stamped on it, Richard replied. That's progress. I wanted to throw my coffee in his face. Instead, I set the mug down carefully and walked away. This man had no idea what was coming, and for the first time since my father's death, I felt a glimmer of something like hope. The night before the ribbon cutting, Marcus confirmed our plan was in place. Judge Monroe would arrive just as Richard was making his grand speech. The legal papers were ready. The property would be restored to me publicly and definitively. I drove to Clearwater one last time before the ceremony. I couldn't get in, but I stood by the lake as the sunset painted the water gold and crimson. I could almost hear Dad's voice in the gentle lapping of waves against the shore. Tomorrow, I whispered, we take it back. For you, for me. In the fading light, I made peace with what was to come. This wasn't about humiliating Richard, though that would be a side effect. It was about standing up for what was right, for honoring my father's legacy, and for refusing to be bullied or erased. As darkness fell, I took one last look at the lodge, my lodge, and drove back to my apartment to prepare for the most important day since my father's funeral. Tomorrow would bring closure, one way or another. The morning of the ribbon cutting dawned clear and bright, as if nature itself approved of what was about to unfold. I dressed carefully in my most professional outfit, a navy blue suit that Dad had helped me pick out for my first job interview. The small gesture of wearing it felt like carrying a piece of him with me into battle. Marcus called as I was pinning my hair up. Everything's in place, he assured me. Judge Monroe will arrive at 11:30, just as Richard begins his speech. The court officers have their instructions. Are you ready? As ready as I'll ever be, I replied, studying my reflection. The woman in the mirror looked calmer than I felt. Remember, let him have his moment, Marcus advised. The higher he climbs, the harder the fall. I arrived at Clearwater Lodge an hour before the ceremony was scheduled to begin. The transformation of the property made my heart ache. Construction crews had cleared much of the natural landscaping Dad had so carefully preserved. A large stage had been erected in the front yard, complete with a podium bearing the Whitman Enterprises logo. Rows of white chairs faced the stage, and a massive red ribbon stretched across the front porch of the lodge. Workers scurried about, setting up a champagne table, arranging flowers, testing the microphone. Richard was nowhere in sight, likely preparing his grand entrance. Colleagues began to arrive, dressed in their finest. Many seemed surprised to see me. "Olivia, I didn't expect you to be here," said Melissa from accounting, her expression a mix of sympathy and curiosity. "I wouldn't miss it," I replied with a tight smile. Travis, my teammate who had inherited the Hendrickson account, squeezed my shoulder as he passed. "Hang in there," he whispered, one of the few who had privately expressed support during these difficult weeks. By 11 hours, the crowd had swelled. Not just Whitman employees, but local business leaders, journalists, and even the mayor had come to witness Richard's moment of triumph. Photographers circled like sharks, capturing the scene from every angle. At precisely 11:15, Richard emerged from inside the lodge, wearing an expensive new suit and the self-satisfied smile of a man who believed he had won. He worked the crowd with practiced charm, shaking hands, accepting congratulations, playing the role of the visionary leader to perfection. When he spotted me at the edge of the gathering, he actually had the audacity to wave me over. "Olivia, so glad you could make it," he said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "I know this place holds sentimental value for you. I hope you'll be pleased with the improvements we're making." I forced myself to smile. "I'm very interested in seeing how this plays out, Richard." He mistook my meaning entirely, clapping me on the shoulder. "That's the spirit. Always good to be a team player." At 11:25, Richard made his way to the stage. The crowd took their seats, and a hush fell over the gathering. I positioned myself near the back, where I could see Judge Monroe's car when it arrived. "Distinguished guests, colleagues, friends," Richard began, his voice booming through the speakers. "Today marks not just a new chapter for Whitman Enterprises, but a bold statement about our vision for the future." He launched into a carefully rehearsed speech about leadership, innovation, and strategic growth, buzzwords that meant nothing while standing on stolen ground. "When I first discovered this property," he continued, rewriting history with every word, "I saw beyond what it was to what it could become. That's what leaders do. We transform the ordinary into the extraordinary. My father had built this place board by board, had poured his heart into every corner. There was nothing ordinary about it, and Richard's claim to have discovered it was the first of many lies." As he spoke, I saw Judge Monroe's car pull up at the edge of the property. She emerged, dignified in her formal attire, accompanied by 2 court officers carrying a folder of documents, right on schedule. "Clearwater Corporate Retreat," Richard continued, oblivious to what was approaching, "will be more than a getaway. It will be the birthplace of our greatest innovations, the foundation of our strongest client relationships, and a testament to our commitment to excellence." Judge Monroe made her way through the crowd, which parted instinctively for her authoritative presence. Richard faltered slightly when he noticed the disturbance, but recovered quickly. "And so," he declared, moving toward the ribbon with a large pair of ceremonial scissors, "it gives me great pleasure to officially open this new chapter in our company's history." He posed for the photographers, scissors poised to cut the ribbon, his moment of glory at hand. That's when Judge Monroe stepped forward, her voice carrying clearly across the hushed gathering. "Mr. Vaughn, I must inform you that you have no legal claim to this property. The rightful owner is standing right here, Olivia Hayes." The silence that followed was absolute. Every head turned first to the judge, then to Richard, then to me. Cameras that had been focused on Richard's triumphant moment now swiveled to capture his reaction. And what a reaction it was. His face transitioned from confusion to disbelief to fury in the span of seconds. The scissors lowered slowly, his knuckles white around the handles. "There must be some mistake," he managed, his voice suddenly stripped of its confidence. "There is no mistake," Judge Monroe replied, nodding to one of the court officers, who stepped forward with the documents. I have here a court order confirming Ms. Hayes' sole ownership of this property, along with an injunction against Whitman Enterprises for unlawful entry, unauthorized modifications, and false claims of ownership. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Journalists were frantically taking notes. Colleagues exchanged shocked glances. Richard tried to regain control of the situation. This is a minor legal misunderstanding that will resolve privately. If everyone would just— This is not a misunderstanding, Mr. Vaughn. Judge Monroe interrupted firmly. This property was inherited by Ms. Hayes from her late father. You have no deed, no bill of sale, no legal claim whatsoever. The locks you changed, the modifications you ordered, and this event itself are all unlawful. Now the whispers in the crowd grew louder. I saw the mayor lean over to his assistant with a concerned expression. The company's PR director was already on her phone, likely trying to contain the damage. The court officer handed Richard the papers, which he took without looking at them, his eyes fixed on me with a mixture of hatred and shock. Furthermore, the judge continued, addressing the crowd. As of this moment, all unauthorized personnel are required to vacate this private property. The only exceptions are Ms. Hayes and those she expressly permits to remain. Richard finally found his voice again. This is ridiculous. I have agreements, contracts, none of which are valid, Marcus interjected, stepping forward to stand beside me. As Ms. Hayes' attorney, I've reviewed everything. You have no legal standing whatsoever, Mr. Vaughn. The crowd began to stir uncomfortably. Some of my colleagues were already edging toward their cars, not wanting to be associated with what was clearly becoming a public relations disaster. Richard turned to the Whitman executives who had attended. Don't just stand there. Call our legal team. The chief financial officer, Sandra Matthews, approached him with a grim expression. Richard, I think we should withdraw and assess the situation before making any further statements. You're just going to surrender? After all the money we've invested in renovations? Richard's voice had taken on a desperate edge. Money spent illegally modifying property that was never yours to begin with, Judge Monroe reminded him coolly. The truth was dawning on everyone present. Richard had made a catastrophic error in judgment, and he'd done it publicly, dragging the company's reputation down with him. I stepped forward, finding my voice at last. I never wanted this confrontation, Richard. All I asked was that you respect my inheritance, my father's legacy. You chose to ignore my rights and my feelings. Your feelings? He spat, abandoning all pretense of professionalism. This isn't about feelings. It's about vision. This place was wasted on your sentimentality. His outburst only dug his hole deeper. I could see the disgust on the faces of those nearby, including his own superiors. Mr. Vaughn, the company CEO said quietly but firmly, that's enough. We're leaving. Now. As the crowd dispersed, Richard stood alone on the stage he had built on my property, the ceremonial scissors hanging limply at his side, the ribbon still uncut. The photographers, who moments ago had been positioned to capture his triumph, now documented his humiliation. Judge Monroe approached me. The property is officially restored to your possession, Ms. Hayes. The court has also ordered Mr. Vaughn and Whitman Enterprises to cover the cost of removing any unwanted modifications and restoring the property to its previous state. Thank you, Your Honor, I said, emotion finally breaking through my composed exterior. Your father built something beautiful here, she replied with a gentle smile. I'm glad we could protect it. As the judge departed, I stood at the edge of the lake, watching the sunlight dance on the water. For the first time since Dad's death, I felt his presence strongly, not in grief, but in triumph. We had protected his legacy together. Marcus joined me, placing a supportive hand on my shoulder. How do you feel? I considered the question carefully. Relieved? Vindicated. A little sad that it had to come to this. Justice isn't always neat, he observed, but it is always worth fighting for. I nodded, watching as the last of the guests departed, leaving me alone at Clearwater once more. But this time, with the keys back in my possession and the deed securely in my name. Dad would have enjoyed that, I said softly. Not the confrontation, but the moment when truth prevailed. Marcus smiled. Your father was always a believer in cosmic justice. He used to say, "What's built on lies eventually collapses under its own weight." I finished quoting Dad's favorite saying. As the sun began to set over Clearwater Lodge, I knew that the battle was won, but the aftermath was just beginning. Richard wouldn't go quietly. His humiliation would fuel his resentment, and I still had to face him at work on Monday. But for now, for this moment, I allowed myself to simply breathe in the victory and the sweet scent of pine and lake water that would always remind me of home. Monday morning arrived with a tension that was almost electric. As I walked through the Whitman Enterprises lobby, conversations hushed, and eyes followed me with a new kind of interest. No longer was I just Olivia from marketing. I was the woman who had publicly exposed Richard Vaughn's deception. The weekend papers had run the story with surprising prominence. Corporate executives' property grab thwarted in public ceremony, read one headline. Another was more direct. Whitman director humiliated as inheritance theft backfires. Most included photos of Richard's stunned face as Judge Monroe delivered her ruling. I kept my head high as I made my way to my desk, ignoring the whispers and stares. Travis greeted me with a fist bump and a grin. "Legendary," he whispered. "Absolutely legendary." Melissa hurried over, coffee in hand. "Is it true that he changed the, locks while you were at your dad's funeral?" Her voice carried more than she probably intended, drawing attention from nearby cubicles. "Not during the funeral," I clarified quietly, "but shortly after." "That's still horrible," she said, shaking her head. "I always thought he was ruthless, but this is something else." Before I could respond, the elevator doors opened, and Richard himself stepped out. The office fell silent immediately. He looked haggard, as though he hadn't slept all weekend. His usually impeccable appearance was slightly disheveled, tie slightly askew, hair not quite perfectly combed. His eyes scanned the room and landed on me. For a moment, I thought he might make a scene right there in the open workspace. Instead, he straightened his shoulders and marched directly to his office, slamming the door behind him. The tension broke slightly, replaced by a buzz of whispered conversations. I tried to focus on my computer screen, but found it impossible to concentrate. An hour later, my phone rang. It was Sandra Matthews, the CFO, requesting my presence in the boardroom. When I arrived, I found not just Sandra, but the entire executive team waiting. Richard was noticeably absent. "Ms. Hayes," began CEO Thomas Grayson, "I want to personally apologize for the situation regarding your property. It appears there was a significant lapse in judgment and due diligence." His careful wording wasn't lost on me. He was apologizing for the situation, not for Richard's actions specifically, and framing it as a procedural failure rather than an ethical one. "Thank you, Mr. Grayson," I replied neutrally. Sandra leaned forward. "We want to assure you that Whitman Enterprises respects private property rights and legal ownership. The company will, of course, comply fully with the court's ruling regarding restoration of your property." Again, the wording was revealing, distancing the company from Richard's actions while acknowledging their legal obligations. "I appreciate that," I said. "My attorney will provide specifics about the restoration requirements." Grayson cleared his throat. "There's another matter we need to address. Given the public nature of Saturday's events, we're concerned about potential conflicts within the marketing department." And there it was, the real reason for this meeting. They were worried about how Richard and I could possibly continue working together. "We'd like to offer you a transfer to our Seattle office," Sandra continued. "Same position, slightly higher salary to account for the cost of living difference. A fresh start, away from this unfortunate situation." I sat back, processing their offer. It wasn't unreasonable on the surface. Seattle was a beautiful city, and the increased salary would be welcome. But the subtext was clear. They wanted to separate me from Richard, and they'd chosen to relocate me rather than discipline him. "That's a generous offer," I said carefully. "May I ask if Mr. Vaughn is facing any consequences for his actions?" The executives exchanged uncomfortable glances. "Personnel matters regarding Mr. Vaughn are being handled separately," Grayson replied diplomatically. "I can assure you that the situation is being addressed appropriately." In other words, nothing substantial would happen to Richard. Perhaps a note in his file, maybe a symbolic slap on the wrist, but nothing that would derail his career. "I see," I said, not bothering to hide my disappointment. "And if I decline the transfer? Then you would continue in your current role," Sandra answered. "But we believe the situation would be challenging for everyone involved." The message was clear. Take the transfer or face an increasingly hostile work environment with no support from upper management. They were protecting Richard, despite his blatant misconduct. "I'll need time to consider," I said, rising from my chair. "This isn't a decision I can make on the spot." Grayson nodded. "Of course. Take the rest of the week if you need it. We can arrange for you to work remotely while you decide." As I left the boardroom, I felt a mixture of anger and resignation. The company was offering me an escape route, not justice. Richard would continue climbing the corporate ladder, his reputation perhaps slightly tarnished, but his position secure. Outside, Travis was waiting by the water cooler, trying to appear casual but obviously concerned. "That bad?" he asked quietly. "They want to ship me to Seattle," I replied. "Fresh start," they said. "And Richard?" "Gets to stay, apparently." Travis shook his head in disgust. "Typical. The company protects its own." "Its own apparently doesn't include me," I said bitterly. "What are you going to do?" It was the question I'd been asking myself since leaving the boardroom. "I'm not sure yet. I need to think." When I returned to my desk, an email was waiting from Richard. From Richard Vaughn to Olivia Hayes. Subject, moving forward. Olivia. In light of recent events, I suggest we maintain strictly professional communication going forward. Any interaction should be limited to essential work matters only. I trust you understand this is in everyone's best interest. Richard Vaughn, Marketing Director, Whitman, Enterprises. The audacity was breathtaking. No apology, no acknowledgement of wrongdoing, just a cold directive as if I had been the one who had transgressed. I closed the email without responding and packed up my things. Working remotely for the rest of the week suddenly seemed like the healthiest option. That evening, I drove to Clearwater Lodge. The construction equipment was gone, though the damage remained. Trampled landscaping, holes where security equipment had been mounted, the garish stage still erected in the front yard. Inside, I found chaos. The beautiful handcrafted furniture Dad had built had been pushed aside to make room for corporate-style conference tables. The warm, rustic decor had been partially replaced, with sterile, modern pieces that clashed horribly with the lodge's character. I sat on the floor of the great room, surrounded by the collision of Dad's vision and Richard's ambition, and finally allowed myself to cry, not just for the damage to the property, but for the sheer exhaustion of fighting for what should have been automatically respected. My phone rang. It was Marcus. "How are you?" "Holding up?" he asked gently. I described the state of the lodge and the meeting with the executives. "So they're protecting him," Marcus observed. "Unfortunately, that's not surprising. Companies often close ranks around high-level executives. They want me to transfer to Seattle." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "That's their solution? Ship you off across the country while Richard continues as if nothing happened?" "Pretty much. What do you want to do, Olivia? Legally, we've won the property battle decisively, but professionally, you're at a crossroads." I looked around at the lodge, damaged but still standing, still fundamentally sound beneath the superficial changes. "I need to rebuild," I said finally. "Both the lodge and my life, but I'm not sure Whitman is where I belong anymore. Not if they value loyalty to power over basic integrity." "For what it's worth," Marcus said, "your father faced similar choices many times. He always said the hardest decisions are between what's easy and what's right." After we hung up, I walked through each room of the lodge, mentally cataloging what needed to be restored and what could be salvaged. In Dad's workshop, I found his tools still, arranged exactly as he had left them, the one area Richard's crews hadn't disturbed. I picked up Dad's favorite hammer, feeling its familiar weight in my hand. He had taught me basic carpentry growing up, insisting it was a life skill everyone should have. "You should always know how to fix what's broken," he'd say. The lodge was broken. My career was at a crossroads. But for the first time since this ordeal began, I felt a sense of clarity emerging from the chaos. I opened my laptop and began typing 2 documents. My resignation letter to Whitman Enterprises and a business plan for a new venture, one that would honor Dad's craftsmanship and turn Clearwater Lodge into something meaningful on my own terms. By morning, both were complete. The resignation was straightforward and professional, offering 2 weeks' notice. The business plan was more complex, but filled me with excitement. Clearwater Artisan Retreats, a space where craftspeople could come to teach, learn, and create in the spirit of my father's legacy. As I drove back to the city, I felt lighter than I had in months. The confrontation with Richard had been necessary, but it was just the beginning of the story, not the end. The true victory wouldn't be in his public humiliation, but in what I built from the ruins of his ambition. When I reached my apartment, I submitted my resignation by email, then called Travis. "You're quitting?" he asked, shocked. "Olivia, they'll see that as letting Richard win." "No," I corrected him. "They'll see it as me refusing to play a rigged game. There's a difference." After a pause, he sighed. "I get it, but I'll miss you. The office needs more people like you, not fewer. Maybe someday they'll learn that." I replied. But I'm not going to wait around hoping for it to happen. My 2 weeks' notice passed in a blur of exit interviews, knowledge transfers, and carefully maintained professionalism. Richard avoided me entirely, orchestrating meetings to ensure we were never in the same room. On my last day, I cleared my desk while colleagues stopped by to say goodbye. Many expressed admiration for my stand against Richard, though always in hushed tones when supervisors weren't around. As I carried my small box of personal items toward the elevator, Richard emerged from his office. Our eyes met across the workspace. For a moment, I thought he might actually approach me, perhaps offer some closing remark or even a belated apology. Instead, he simply watched me go, his expression unreadable. Whatever lessons he'd learned from our conflict, genuine remorse didn't appear to be among them. Outside the Whitman building, I paused to look up at the corporate logo illuminated against the sky. 5 years ago, being hired here had felt like a triumph. Now, walking away felt like an even greater one. I placed the box in my car and drove toward Clearwater, toward the future I was choosing for myself. One built not on corporate ladder climbing, but on honoring what truly mattered. Dad would have approved. And in the end, that was the only endorsement I needed. The first month at Clearwater passed in a flurry of reconstruction and planning. With the compensation from Whitman Enterprises, a settlement Marcus had negotiated to cover the unauthorized modifications, I was able to hire local craftsmen to help restore the lodge to its original state and then enhance it for its new purpose. I started with Dad's workshop, clearing away the dust and reorganizing his tools exactly as he had kept them. This would be the heart of Clearwater Artisan Retreats, a space where skilled craftspeople could teach others, and where beginners could discover the joy of creating with their hands. Mason Thornfield, a local carpenter who had occasionally worked with Dad, became my right hand in the restoration. In his 60s, with weathered hands and quiet wisdom, Mason approached each task with the same reverence for wood that Dad had taught me. "Your father built this place to last generations?" Mason observed as we repaired the front porch where Richard's stage had damaged the decking. "Good bones, smart design. He knew what he was doing. He used to say that anything worth building is worth building right the first time," I replied, holding a board steady as Mason secured it. "Smart man. These days everybody wants everything quick and cheap, but quick and cheap don't stand the test of time." As we worked, I shared my vision for Clearwater Artisan Retreats with Mason. Weekend workshops for beginners, week-long retreats for those looking to deepen their skills, a space where the digital world could be set aside in favor of tangible creation. "It's swimming against the current," I admitted. "Everyone's moving toward technology, virtual experiences. I'm proposing the opposite. Real materials, physical skills, face-to-face teaching." Mason paused, hammer in mid-swing. "Swimming against the current is exactly what this world needs right now, Olivia. Your dad would be proud of this plan. Real proud." By the end of the month, the restoration was nearly complete. The landscaping had been repaired, the interior returned to its warm, rustic charm, and the workshop expanded to accommodate small classes. I had created a website, designed brochures, and begun reaching out to potential instructors. One afternoon, as I was photographing the completed spaces for the website, my phone rang. It was Travis from Whitman. "How's life on the other side?" he asked when I answered. "Busy but good," I replied. "How's Whitman?" "Changing, actually. Richard's gone." I nearly dropped the phone. "Gone? What happened?" "After your departure, more stories started coming out. Apparently, the Clearwater situation wasn't his first ethical shortcut. The board launched an investigation, and let's just say they found a pattern. He was asked to resign yesterday." I sat down on the workshop steps, processing this unexpected news. I never thought they'd actually hold him accountable. "Neither did he," Travis said with a hint of satisfaction. "But your stand against him opened the floodgates. Once people saw someone successfully challenge him, others found their courage too." After the call ended, I walked down to the lakeshore, trying to sort through my feelings. I had never wished for Richard's downfall. I had simply wanted what was rightfully mine, and the respect my father's legacy deserved. Yet there was undeniable satisfaction in knowing that justice had eventually caught up with him. As the sun began to set over the water, casting long golden reflections across the surface, I realized I felt no desire to gloat over Richard's fate. His ambition had been his undoing, not my actions. I had simply refused to be its casualty. The following weekend marked the official launch of Clearwater Artisan Retreats. I had scheduled an open house, inviting locals and potential clients to tour the facility and experience mini workshops in basic woodworking, weaving, and pottery. The first 3 skills we would be teaching. I woke early, too anxious to sleep, and walked through each space making final adjustments. Dad's presence felt especially strong. That morning, as if he were walking beside me, nodding approval at what I'd built from the foundations he had laid. "I hope I'm getting it right," I whispered to the empty room, running my hand along the workbench he had crafted decades ago. The first guests began arriving at 10. Local families curious about the transformation. A few journalists from regional publications, artists, and craftspeople interested in teaching or participating. Even some former colleagues from Whitman, including Travis and Melissa, who had driven up to show support. As I guided groups through the spaces, explaining the vision behind Clearwater Artisan Retreats, I was struck by the genuine enthusiasm I encountered. People lingered in the workshop, asking detailed questions about the tools and techniques. They signed up for upcoming classes, purchased handcrafted items from our inaugural instructors, and filled the comment cards with encouraging messages. "This is exactly what our community needed," one woman told me, her young daughter clutching a small wooden boat she had helped make in one of the mini workshops. A place to disconnect from screens and reconnect with creating, by Wyatt. Late afternoon, the attendance had exceeded my most optimistic projections. The demonstration classes were fully booked, the refreshment table needed constant replenishing, and the sign-up sheet for future workshops was filling rapidly. As the crowd thinned toward evening, I found myself standing on the porch, watching the sunset with Travis and Melissa. "This is incredible, Olivia," Melissa said, gesturing at the lodge and the scattered groups still exploring the grounds. "You've created something really special here. It doesn't even compare to the corporate world, does it?" Travis observed. "There's an authenticity here that Whitman could never manufacture." "It's still surreal sometimes," I admitted. 6 months ago, I was grieving Dad and fighting to keep this place. Now it's become something I don't think either of us could have imagined. As darkness fell, the last guests departed, leaving behind a successful first day and promising signs for Clearwater's future. I walked through the quiet spaces, straightening chairs and gathering stray materials, feeling bone-tired but deeply satisfied. In the main hall, I found Mason sitting alone by the fireplace, nursing the last of his coffee. "Quite a day," he said as I joined him. 26 sign-ups for the Introduction to Woodworking course alone. "I can't believe it went so well," I replied, sinking gratefully into a chair. I was prepared for polite interest, not actual enthusiasm. "People are hungry for this," Mason said, gesturing around us. "Real skills, real materials, things that last." He paused, studying my face. "You're exhausted, but it's the good kind, isn't it?" I nodded, too tired for words. The good kind of exhaustion, the kind that comes from creating something worthwhile, something aligned with your values. "Your dad and I used to talk about the difference between making a living and building a life," Mason continued. "Lots of folks get so caught up in the first that they forget about the second. You're doing both here." As the embers in the fireplace glowed orange and red, we sat in companionable silence, 2 woodworkers appreciating the end of a well-spent day. The ghost of Richard Vaughan and the corporate politics of Whitman seemed increasingly distant, like a story I had read rather than lived. In the weeks that followed, Clearwater Artisan Retreats gathered momentum. The first official workshops filled quickly, with waiting lists forming for future sessions. Local artisans began approaching me about teaching specialized classes. A regional lifestyle magazine ran a feature on our return to craftsmanship philosophy. One evening, as I was closing up after a particularly successful day, I received an unexpected email. From Sandra Matthews to Olivia Hayes. Subject: Anne I. Overdue apology. Dear Olivia, I hope this message finds you well. I've been following the success of your new venture through mutual connections, and was particularly impressed by the recent magazine feature. I'm writing to offer a personal and professional apology for how Whitman handled the situation with Richard and your property. As you may know, Richard is no longer with the company, and the board has implemented new ethics training and reporting procedures to prevent similar situations in the future. Looking back, I realize we were more concerned with avoiding scandal than doing what was right. The offer to transfer you rather than addressing Richard's misconduct was particularly misguided, and for that I am truly sorry. If you're amenable, I would like to discuss the possibility of Whitman contracting with Clearwater Artisan Retreats for some of our team building and leadership events. The irony is not lost on me, but I genuinely believe your approach to craftsmanship and authenticity could benefit our corporate culture. Please let me know if you would be open to a conversation. Sincerely, Sandra Matthews, CFO, Whitman Enterprises. I read the email 3 times. Emotions, cycling between vindication, lingering resentment, and pragmatic consideration. Sandra's apology seemed sincere, if belated, and the business opportunity could be significant for Clearwater's growth. After careful thought, I composed a response. From Olivia Hayes to Sandra Matthews. Subject: an overdue apology. Dear Sandra, thank you for your email and apology, which I accept. While the past cannot be changed, I appreciate your acknowledgement of how the situation was handled. Regarding your proposal, I would be open to discussing how Clearwater Artisan Retreats might serve Whitman's team-building needs, with certain conditions. Our philosophy here is centered on authenticity, craftsmanship, and respect for both materials and process. Any collaboration would need to honor these principles. If you'd like to visit Clearwater to experience our approach firsthand, I could arrange a tour and demonstration. This would give us both a better sense of whether a partnership would be mutually beneficial. Best regards, Olivia Hayes, founder, Clearwater Artisan Retreats. As I sent the email, I realized how much I had changed since the ribbon-cutting ceremony. 6 months ago, I might have rejected Sandra's overture outright, too wounded by Whitman's betrayal to consider any reconnection. Now I could separate the business opportunity from the emotional history, evaluating it on its own merits. Dad had always taught me that true craftsmanship required both technical skill and emotional wisdom, knowing when to cut, when to sand, when to leave the natural beauty of the wood to speak for itself. Perhaps the same principles applied to rebuilding a life after loss and conflict. The following Sunday, I hosted a special workshop for local children, teaching them to build simple birdhouses using pre-cut pieces that they could assemble, sand, and paint themselves. Watching their concentrated faces as they carefully applied glue and held pieces together, I felt a profound sense of continuing something important, not just Dad's specific legacy, but the broader tradition of making, of creating something tangible in an increasingly virtual world. Miss Olivia, one little boy called out, proudly holding up his completed birdhouse, paint still wet and slightly smeared. Do you think birds will really come to this? I knelt beside him, examining his work with appropriate seriousness. I absolutely do. You've built them a beautiful home. And you know what? You can watch and see exactly who moves in. His face lit up with the possibility, and in that moment, I understood more clearly than ever what Clearwater was really offering. Not just skills or products, but connection. Connection to materials, to process, to the natural world, and to each other. As the children departed with their creations, parents in tow, I stood on the porch watching them go, feeling the weight of the past 6 months like a story reaching its final chapter. What had begun with loss and conflict had transformed into something new and meaningful, not despite those challenges, but because of how they had shaped me. Richard had unwittingly given me the push I needed to define myself, outside the corporate structure he valued so highly. His attempt to claim what wasn't his had ultimately helped me see more clearly what was mine to build. And for that, in the strangest way, I was grateful. Clearwater Artisan Retreats celebrated its 6-month anniversary with a weekend festival showcasing the work of our students and instructors. The grounds were transformed into an outdoor gallery with handcrafted furniture, woven textiles, pottery, and wood carvings displayed under white canopy tents. Live demonstrations attracted crowds throughout the day, and the workshop hummed with the sound of tools and excited conversations. I was adjusting a display of student work when Mason approached with an odd expression on his face. "You have a visitor," he said, nodding toward the parking area. I turned to see a familiar figure standing uncertainly by the entrance. Richard Vaughn. My stomach tightened. In the months since his departure from Whitman, I had heard through Travis that Richard had struggled to find another executive position, his reputation tarnished by the ethics investigation. Eventually, he had taken a much less prestigious role at a smaller company. "What is he doing here?" I asked Mason quietly. "Said he wanted to speak with you. I told him you were busy with the festival, but he insisted on waiting." I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "I suppose I should see what he wants." "Want me to hover nearby?" Mason offered, his protective instinct evident. "No, I'll be fine. But thanks." I made my way across the grounds, noticing how Richard seemed diminished somehow. His designer suit had been replaced with casual business attire, his confident posture with something more hesitant. When he saw me approaching, he straightened slightly, as if trying to recapture his former authority. "Olivia?" He greeted me, his voice carefully neutral. Richard, this is unexpected. He glanced around at the festival, the visitors examining crafts, the instructors demonstrating techniques. You've done well with the place. Thank you. What brings you here? Richard shifted uncomfortably. I've been doing some reflection since Whitman. My therapist suggested that part of my recovery process should include making amends where possible. I couldn't hide my surprise. You're in therapy? A flash of the old defensiveness crossed his face, but quickly subsided. Losing my position forced me to examine some patterns. It hasn't been easy. We stood awkwardly for a moment, the festival continuing around us. Finally, Richard spoke again. I came to apologize, Olivia. What I did with your property was wrong. I convinced myself it was just business, that the end justified the means, but it was wrong. Plain and simple. His words seemed rehearsed but not insincere. I studied his face, trying to reconcile this humbled version of Richard with the arrogant executive who had locked me out of my own inheritance. That's unexpected, I said finally, but I appreciate you saying it. I don't expect forgiveness, he continued. I just thought you deserved to hear it directly from me. I'm sorry for what I did, and for how I treated you afterward. A group of workshop attendees walked past, casting curious glances our way. I nodded toward a quieter area by the lake. Let's continue this conversation somewhere less public. As we walked, I noticed Richard taking in the details of Clearwater. The restored landscaping, the expanded workshop, the new studio spaces I'd added for different crafts. It's nothing like what I had planned, he observed. No, it's not, I agreed. But it's exactly what it needed to be. We reached a small sitting area overlooking the water. Richard remained standing, hands in his pockets, gaze fixed on the horizon. Sandra told me about your arrangement with Whitman, he said. Ironic, isn't it? The place I tried to turn into a corporate retreat is now hosting corporate retreats, just on very different terms. Life has a strange way of coming full circle sometimes, I replied, though I doubt either of us could have predicted this particular outcome. Richard finally turned to face me directly. I was wrong about something else, too. I called your attachment to this place sentimentality, as if that made it less valuable. But watching what you've created here, he gestured at the wall, thriving festival behind us. This isn't just sentiment. It's vision. A different kind than mine, but no less valid. His admission caught me off guard. The Richard I had known at Whitman would never have acknowledged another person's vision as equal to his own. What happened after Whitman? I asked, genuinely curious about his journey. Richard's shoulders slumped slightly. The usual story when an executive is forced out under an ethics cloud. Doors that used to open stayed closed. Former colleagues suddenly couldn't take my calls. I finally found a position at Meridian Consulting. Smaller firm, lower title, significantly reduced salary. And how is that going? Humbling, he admitted with a rueful smile. I'm not the star anymore, not even close. I report to people younger than me, people who would have been several layers below me at Whitman. That must be difficult for you, I said, surprised to find I actually meant it. It is. But necessary, probably. He hesitated. This place, what happened here, was a wake-up call. I'd been operating a certain way for so long that I stopped questioning it. Success justified everything. A comfortable silence fell between us, broken, only by distant laughter from the festival and the gentle lapping of water against the shore. After everything that had happened, I found myself oddly at peace in Richard's presence, not because I had forgotten the harm he'd caused, but because it no longer held power over me. Your father built this place, didn't he? Richard asked suddenly. Yes, board by board, over 5 summers. It shows. There's a coherence to it, a integrity. He smiled slightly at his choice of words, something my corporate renovation plans would have destroyed completely. Probably, I agreed. But that's in the past now. Richard nodded slowly. Yes, it is. He straightened, his momentary vulnerability receding slightly. I should let you get back to your festival. Thank you for hearing me out. Richard, I said as he turned to leave, I hope you find what you're looking for, at Meridian or wherever your path leads next. He paused, clearly surprised by my genuine well wishes. Thank you, Olivia. I hope, he gestured at Clearwater, at the life I had built from the ashes of our conflict. I hope this continues to thrive. I watched him walk back to his car, a strange mixture of emotions washing over me. There was no sudden warmth or forgiveness. The wounds he had inflicted were too deep for that. But there was a sense of completion, of a chapter truly ending. Mason appeared at my side as Richard's car pulled away. "Everything okay?" "Yes," I said, surprised to find it was true. He came to apologize. "Huh?" Mason grunted skeptically. "Seems like the least he could do." "It was." I agreed. But it was also unexpected. People don't always do even the minimum when it comes to acknowledging their mistakes. We turned back toward the festival, where a wood-turning demonstration was drawing an appreciative crowd. The instructor, a master craftsman from upstate who specialized in bowls and vessels, was explaining the importance of working with the wood's natural grain rather than against it. "The wood tells you where it wants to go," he was saying as we approached. "The grain reveals the path. Fight it, and you get cracks, splits, failures. Work with it, and you create something beautiful that honors the tree it came from." His words struck me as the perfect metaphor for the past year of my life. I had fought to protect something precious, then found a way to honor it by working with its natural potential rather than imposing an artificial vision upon it. The festival continued into the evening, with a community dinner served at long tables set up on the lawn. Local musicians played acoustic instruments as the sun set, casting warm golden light across the gathering. I moved from table to table, listening to stories, answering questions about upcoming workshops, and absorbing the genuine enthusiasm for what Clearwater had become. Later that night, after the last guest had departed and the cleanup was complete, I sat alone on the porch, reflecting on Richard's unexpected visit. His apology hadn't erased the past, but it had helped me see our conflict with new clarity. Richard had approached Clearwater as something to be conquered and reshaped according to his vision. I had fought to preserve it, then ultimately found a way to evolve it while honoring its essence. Both of us had been transformed in the process, me into someone stronger and more purposeful, him into someone perhaps more reflective and humble. As I gazed at the moonlight reflecting on the lake, I realized that Dad would have appreciated this outcome. He had always maintained that wood, taught patience and humility. You couldn't rush it or force it beyond its nature. People, perhaps, were not so different. The following morning, I woke to find an envelope that had been slipped under the door. Inside was a check for a substantial amount and a note in Richard's handwriting for the renovations and distress. No strings attached. This doesn't undo what happened, but it might help Clearwater grow. Consider it restitution, not charity. RV. I sat with the check for a long time, weighing the implications of accepting it. The amount would allow me to build the additional studio space I had been planning, expand our scholarship program for disadvantaged youth, and establish a more substantial emergency fund for the business. Eventually, I made my decision. I deposited the check, but earmarked the entire amount for the scholarship program, ensuring that Richard's restitution would directly benefit others rather than myself. 2 weeks later, a feature article appeared in the Regional Business Journal, Clearwater Artisan Retreats, a new model for sustainable business. When Olivia Hayes inherited her father's handcrafted lakeside lodge, she didn't envision it becoming a thriving business. After successfully defending her ownership against corporate acquisition attempts, Hayes transformed Clearwater into something unexpected, a center for traditional crafts education that's attracting national attention. We're offering something that's increasingly rare in our digital age, Hayes explains, showing this reporter around the expanded workshops where students learn everything from furniture making to weaving. The chance to disconnect from screens and reconnect with materials, with process, with creating something tangible. What began as a personal mission has evolved into a surprisingly robust business model. Clearwater now hosts weekend workshops for beginners, week-long retreats for advancing artisans, and specialized corporate events focused on teamwork. Through collaborative creating. It's the opposite of typical team-building exercises, says Sandra Matthews, CFO of Whitman Enterprises, which regularly sends groups to Clearwater. Instead of trust falls or ropes courses, our people learn to communicate by actually making something together. The results have been remarkable. Hayes credits her father's craftsmanship philosophy for Clearwater's approach. He believed that working with your hands connected you to something essential and grounding. In our hyper-connected, often superficial world, that connection is what people are hungry for. With a 6-month waiting list for popular workshops and expansion plans already underway, Clearwater Artisan Retreats stands as testament to the power of honoring tradition while embracing innovation, and to the unexpected paths that can emerge from standing firm for what you believe in. I taped the article to the refrigerator in Dad's kitchen, now my kitchen, and smiled at the journey it represented. From fighting for what was rightfully mine to building something new and meaningful, from grief to purpose, from conflict to creation. Richard's ribbon-cutting ceremony had never happened, but in its place, something far more authentic had emerged. Not a corporate showcase, but a living testament to craftsmanship, integrity, and the power of building something true. 1 year to the day after the failed ribbon-cutting ceremony, I stood in the expanded workshop at Clearwater, watching 20 students bent over workbenches, each crafting a small wooden box with dovetail joints. The concentration on their faces, some furrowed in frustration, others relaxed in flow, mirrored what I had seen on my father's face countless times as he worked. Patience, Mason reminded a young woman who was rushing her cuts. The wood remembers every mistake, but it also rewards every moment of care. I smiled at the familiar wisdom. Dad had said almost exactly the same words to me when teaching me my first dovetail joint at age 12. Now those words were being passed to a new generation of makers, creating a legacy that extended far beyond physical objects. The morning sun streamed through the workshop's eastern windows, illuminating particles of sawdust that danced in the air like tiny constellations. The smell of fresh-cut pine and lemon oil filled the space, scents that would always remind me of Dad. After class, as the students cleaned their workspaces and admired their progress, my phone buzzed with a message from Sandra Matthews at Whitman. Olivia, board-approved expanded partnership. Contract details to follow. They were especially impressed with the leadership outcomes from last month's executive retreat. Well done. Sandra. The news was welcome, but no longer surprising. What had begun as a tentative arrangement between Clearwater and Whitman had evolved into a significant partnership. Corporate teams now regularly came to Clearwater for specialized retreats focused on collaborative creation rather than traditional team-building exercises. The results had been so positive that other companies were following suit, creating a waitlist for our corporate programs. As I was responding to Sandra's message, I noticed a familiar figure at the edge of the workshop, Margaret Wilson, a real estate developer who had approached me multiple times about buying Clearwater. "Ms. Hayes," she called, walking toward me with her characteristic confidence. "Do you have a moment?" I suppressed a sigh. "Margaret, what can I do for you today?" She gestured toward the lake, visible through the windows. "I've come with a new proposal. Given Clearwater's success over the past year, my investors have authorized me to increase our offer by 30%. "That's very generous," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "But nothing has changed on my end. Clearwater isn't for sale." Margaret's professional smile didn't waver. "Olivia, may I call you Olivia? I understand your emotional attachment to this place, but you must consider the long-term potential. With our resources, we could expand the concept across multiple locations, create a national brand. You could maintain creative control while leveraging our capital and expertise." It was a tempting vision, presented with practiced persuasiveness. A year ago, faced with the financial uncertainties of a new business, I might have been swayed by the security such an offer represented. But Clearwater's growth had exceeded all projections, proving that authentic vision could compete with corporate scale. "I appreciate your persistence," I said, guiding her toward the door. "But this place isn't just a business model to be replicated. Each board was selected by my father, each beam raised with specific intention. That can't be franchised." Margaret looked genuinely puzzled. "But surely you want to grow, to reach more people?" "We are growing," I explained, "but organically in ways that honor why this place exists. The right pace, the right reasons." As she departed with promises to return with an even better offer, I couldn't help but see the parallels between Margaret's approach and Richard's. Both viewed Clearwater as an asset to be acquired and optimized, missing the essential truth that its value lay precisely in its uniqueness and integrity. Later that afternoon, I met with Julia Chen, the woodworker I'd hired to manage day-to-day operations while I focused on strategic development. At 35, Julia brought both skilled craftsmanship and unexpected business acumen to Clearwater, a combination that had proven invaluable as we expanded. "The summer workshop series is fully booked," Julia reported, scrolling through her tablet. "The waiting list is long enough to fill another complete session if we had the capacity." "Which we don't yet," I noted, reviewing the blueprint layouts we'd been working on. "The new East Wing will add 2 teaching spaces, but construction won't start until fall." Julia nodded. "I've been thinking about that. What if we offered some limited outdoor classes during summer? Simple projects, small groups, focused on the connection between woodworking and nature." The suggestion perfectly captured Clearwater's evolving philosophy. What had begun as a craft education center was gradually embracing a broader mission, helping people reconnect with natural materials, traditional skills, and intentional creation in an increasingly digital world. That's brilliant, I agreed. Let's develop a pilot program for July. As Julia left to work on the details, I walked to the small office that had once been Dad's reading nook. The space had been thoughtfully adapted for administrative work while maintaining its cozy character. Dad's old leather chair still occupied the corner by the window, though now it faced a desk made from reclaimed lumber, one of my own early pieces. On the wall hung a simple frame containing the deed to Clearwater, a silent reminder of the battle that had led to this new chapter. Beside it was a photograph of Dad standing proudly on the newly completed porch, his arm around my teenage shoulders, both of us grinning in satisfied exhaustion. I sat at the desk, opening the quarterly financial reports Julia had prepared. The numbers told a story of steady growth and solid footing, not the explosive scaling that Margaret's investors might demand, but sustainable prosperity built on quality and authenticity. As evening approached, I closed my laptop and walked down to the lakeside path that circled the property. This daily ritual had become my time for reflection, a way to connect with the land and with memories of Dad. The path curved through pines he had carefully preserved during construction, emerged at the small sandy beach where we had swum in summers, and eventually circled back to the main lodge. Along the way, I often found myself having silent conversations with him about decisions, challenges, and moments of unexpected joy. "You wouldn't believe what we've built here, Dad," I murmured, watching the sunset paint the water in shades of gold and crimson. "It's so different from what you imagined, and yet somehow exactly what you were working toward all along." As darkness fell, I returned to find Mason sitting on the porch, whittling a small piece of cherry wood with practiced motions of his pocket knife. "Turning into a fine evening," he observed as I joined him. "It is," I agreed, settling into the adjacent rocking chair. Margaret Wilson came by again with another offer. Mason snorted. "That woman's persistent, I'll give her that." What was it this time? Condos? Luxury timeshares? A national expansion. Multiple Clearwaters across the country. "As if you could package this place like a fast food franchise," he said, shaking his head. "Some people just don't understand what makes something valuable." We rocked in companionable silence, watching the first stars appear above the lake. Mason's whittling took shape, a small, perfect bird emerging from the cherry wood. "Heard from Richard lately?" he asked after a while. "Not directly," I replied. "Travis mentioned he's doing well at Meridian. Apparently, he's developed quite a reputation as a mentor to younger staff. People can surprise you," Mason observed. "Sometimes it takes getting knocked down a peg to find your better self." "Sometimes," I agreed, thinking of Richard's unexpected apology and the restitution check that had funded our youth scholarship program. The program had brought diverse students to Clearwater who might otherwise never have experienced traditional crafts, including 3 remarkably talented teenagers who were now apprenticing with our master craftspeople. "Your dad believed everyone deserved second chances," Mason said, carefully shaping the bird's wing with his knife. "Not that they were entitled to them, mind you, but that they deserved the opportunity to earn them." I smiled at the distinction, so characteristic of Dad's practical wisdom. I think he would have approved of how things worked out with Richard. Justice without vengeance, accountability without destruction. Mason nodded, holding up his carving to examine it in the porch light. "That's the thing about working wood that most people don't get. It's not about controlling the material. It's about respecting its nature and finding the possibility within it." As night settled fully over Clearwater, I felt a deep contentment that went beyond business success or personal vindication. I had not only protected what my father had built, but had expanded it in ways that honored his values and vision. The conflict with Richard, painful as it had been, had ultimately pushed me to discover strengths and possibilities I might otherwise never have recognized. "Mason," I said as we prepared to head inside, "do you think Dad would be surprised by what Clearwater has become?" The old craftsman considered the question carefully, pocketing his knife and the finished wooden bird. "Surprised? Maybe by the specifics, but not by the spirit of the place." He gestured toward the workshop where lights still glowed as a few dedicated students worked late on their projects. "He always said this land had a purpose. You found it. That's what matters." Inside, I checked my calendar for the following day. A morning meeting with local artisans interested in teaching, afternoon sessions with advanced students, and an evening presentation to potential donors for the scholarship fund. The busy schedule reflected Clearwater's transformation from personal sanctuary to community resource. Before heading upstairs to bed, I paused in the great room where Richard had once envisioned corporate gatherings with projected presentations and catered lunches. Instead, the space now held comfortable seating arranged around a central demonstration area, the walls lined with shelves, displaying student and instructor work. Tomorrow, this room would fill with people drawn together by the desire to create something lasting with their hands. They would learn not just techniques, but the patience, problem-solving, and perspective that working with natural materials teaches. And in doing so, they would carry forward something of my father's legacy, not because I had insisted upon it, but because the values embedded in craftsmanship spoke for themselves. I turned off the lights and climbed the stairs to the loft bedroom, still my favorite space in the lodge with its panoramic views of the night sky. As I drifted towards sleep, I felt Dad's presence in the sturdy beams above, in the precisely fitted floorboards beneath, in every thoughtful detail of the home he had built. "We did it, Dad," I whispered to the quiet darkness. "We protected what matters. And then we built something new from that foundation." The soft creaking of the lodge settling for the night seemed to answer, the voice of well-crafted wood that continues to speak long after the hands that shaped it have moved on. Spring arrived with unexpected opportunities. A prominent crafts magazine had featured Clearwater in its cover story, bringing national attention to our programs. The article, titled "Reclaiming Craft in a Digital Age," positioned what we were doing as part of a larger cultural shift, a return to tangible creation and meaningful work amidst increasing automation and virtual experiences. The publicity brought a flood of applications for both our public workshops and instructor positions. It also attracted attention from unexpected quarters, including an email that appeared in my inbox on a rain-soaked Tuesday morning. From Richard Vaughn to Olivia Hayes. Subject: A proposition. Dear Olivia, I hope this message finds you well. I've been following Clearwater's success with genuine admiration. The recent magazine feature was well-deserved recognition for what you've built. I'm writing with an unexpected proposition. Meridian Consulting has been contracted by the State Economic Development Office to design a program supporting traditional crafts as viable small businesses. Given Clearwater's model and your first-hand experience, your input would be invaluable. If you're open to it, I'd like to discuss the possibility of Clearwater serving as a case study and potential partner in this initiative. The program would provide resources to craftspeople attempting to build sustainable businesses while preserving traditional skills. This is strictly professional, no hidden agendas. I understand completely if you prefer not to work together given our history. Regards, Richard Vaughn, Senior Consultant, Meridian Consulting. I stared at the screen, unsure how to feel about this unexpected outreach. The program sounded worthwhile. Exactly the kind of support that could help individual artisans turn their skills into viable livelihoods. And Richard's respectful tone acknowledged our complicated past without either ignoring it or dwelling on it excessively. After careful consideration, I replied, From Olivia Hayes to Richard Vaughn, subject, a proposition. Richard, thank you for reaching out. The initiative sounds promising and aligns with Clearwater's mission of preserving traditional crafts while making them economically viable in the modern marketplace. I'd be willing to discuss how Clearwater might contribute to the program. Would you be available for a call this Thursday to share more details? Regards, Olivia Hayes, Director, Clearwater Artisan Retreats. Our subsequent conversation was surprisingly productive. Richard outlined a program that would provide grants, business training, and marketing support to craftspeople throughout the state. Clearwater could serve as both a model and a training site, hosting workshops on the business aspects of artisanship alongside our technical instruction. The goal is to help these skills survive as more than hobbies, Richard explained. Many master craftspeople struggle with the business aspects: pricing, marketing, scaling appropriately without compromising quality. That's definitely been our experience, I agreed. We've been incorporating business modules into our advanced programs, but having dedicated resources would make a significant difference. Richard hesitated. I want to be completely transparent, Olivia. I proposed this partnership because I genuinely believe Clearwater is the right fit for the program, but I also saw it as an opportunity to contribute something positive after our previous interaction. His candor was disarming. The Richard I had known at Whitman would never have acknowledged personal motivation alongside professional reasoning. I appreciate your honesty, I said, and I'm willing to move forward if the program truly benefits the artisan community we serve. Over the following weeks, we developed the framework for what would become the Traditional Crafts Business Initiative. Working with Richard proved surprisingly straightforward. His strategic thinking complemented my practical experience, and his corporate connections opened doors that, might otherwise have remained closed to a relatively new organization like Clearwater. Julia was initially skeptical when I explained the collaboration. "Are you sure about this? Given your history with him?" "I'm not sure about anything," I admitted. "But the program has real merit, and Richard has been nothing but professional. I think Dad would say this is an opportunity to create something good from a difficult past." By early summer, the initiative was ready to launch. The state had committed substantial funding, and 10 master craftspeople had been selected for the pilot program. Clearwater would host the business training components, while the participants would continue working from their own studios. The evening before the kickoff event, I walked the grounds with Mason, discussing the transformation the property had undergone over the past 2 years. "Remember when you were fighting just to keep the place?" he asked, gesturing toward the original lodge, now complemented by thoughtfully designed additional structures that echoed its architectural style. "Every day," I replied. "Sometimes I still can't quite believe how it all unfolded." "Life rarely moves in straight lines," Mason observed. "More like wood grain, flowing around obstacles, finding the path of least resistance while still moving forward." We paused at the spot where Richard's ceremonial stage had once stood, where Judge Monroe had delivered the ruling that changed everything. Now the area featured a demonstration pavilion where outdoor classes could be held during pleasant weather. "What would you think if I told you Richard Vaughn will be here tomorrow for the initiative launch?" I asked, watching Mason's reaction carefully. His bushy eyebrows rose slightly. "I'd think you're a more forgiving person than most." "Not forgiving exactly," I clarified. "More pragmatic. His connections and expertise are valuable to this program, which helps the craftspeople we care about. It seems counterproductive to let past conflicts prevent something positive." Mason nodded slowly. "Your dad used to say that good wood sometimes comes from troubled trees. The knots and burls that make working difficult can create the most beautiful patterns." The next morning, representatives from the State Economic Development Office, selected artisans, and local media gathered at Clearwater for the initiative's official launch. Richard arrived early, maintaining a respectful professional distance while helping coordinate final details with the state officials. When it was time for the formal announcement, I found myself standing at a podium, not unlike the one Richard had used during his attempted ribbon cutting 2 years earlier. The irony wasn't lost on either of us, as I acknowledged with a brief glance in his direction before addressing the gathered crowd. "Traditional crafts represent more than just products or skills," I began. "They embody values essential to meaningful work: patience, problem-solving, respect for materials, and connection to both history and natural resources. Through this initiative, we hope to ensure these values continue to find expression in our increasingly digital economy." As I introduced the participating artisans, a blacksmith, a potter, a weaver, a glassblower, furniture makers, and others, I was struck by the full-circle nature of the moment. What had begun as a battle to protect my inheritance had evolved into a mission to protect a broader legacy of craftsmanship that extended far beyond Clearwater itself. Later, as the formal program concluded, and attendees broke into smaller discussion groups, Richard approached me with a tentative expression. "That was well done," he said. "You have a gift for articulating why this work matters without sounding sentimental or backward-looking." "Thank you," I replied, surprised by the genuine compliment. "How does it feel to be back at Clearwater under such different circumstances?" He glanced around at the thriving center the property had become. "Surreal, honestly, but also right, somehow. Like the place found its true purpose despite my misguided plans for it." His self-awareness caught me off guard. The Richard who had tried to claim Clearwater would never have acknowledged his vision as misguided, or recognized a purpose beyond his own designs. "Life has a way of revealing what matters," I offered. "Sometimes dramatically." Richard nodded, a rueful smile crossing his face. "The ribbon cutting that never happened was the best thing that could have occurred. For this place certainly, and probably for me as well, though it didn't feel that way at the time." We were interrupted by a state official with questions about the program timeline, ending our brief moment of reflection. But throughout the day, I found myself considering how thoroughly perspectives can change when viewed through the lens of time and consequence. As evening approached and the event wound down, I stood on the porch watching the last visitors depart. Julia joined me, satisfaction evident in her expression. "The initiative is going to make a real difference for these artisans," she said. especially the business mentorship component. I think so too, I agreed. Many of them have incredible skills but struggle with sustainability. Julia hesitated, then added, "Your father would have been proud today, not just of what you've built, but of how you've built it." Her words touched something deep within me. Dad had valued craftsmanship not only for the objects it produced, but for the character it developed. The patience, resilience, and integrity required to create something of lasting worth. There were moments I wasn't sure we'd get here, I admitted, especially during the conflict with Richard and Whitman. "And now you're collaborating with him on a state initiative," Julia observed. "Life is strange." "It is," I agreed. "But I'm beginning to think that's how growth happens. Not in comfortable, predictable increments, but through challenges that force us to discover who we really are and what truly matters to us." Later that night, after everyone had gone and Clearwater settled into its peaceful evening rhythms, I sat in Dad's workshop, running my hands over the tools he had used for decades. Each bore the marks of countless projects, some practical, some beautiful, all created with care and intention. In the quiet darkness, I could almost hear his voice offering the guidance he had shared throughout my childhood. "Take your time. Work with the grain. Build for those who come after you." I had fought for Clearwater because it was my inheritance, the physical embodiment of Dad's legacy. But the true inheritance had proven to be something less tangible but more enduring. The values embedded in how he had lived and worked, the principles that now informed everything we did at Clearwater Artisan Retreats. Richard's attempted corporate takeover, painful as it had been, had ultimately clarified and strengthened my commitment to those values. Without that conflict, Clearwater might have remained simply a private sanctuary rather than evolving into the vibrant community resource it had become. The following morning, I woke before sunrise and made my way to the dock that extended into the lake. The water was perfectly still, reflecting the fading stars and first hints of dawn. In this liminal moment between night and day, I felt a profound sense of completion. Not an ending, but a recognition that one significant cycle had come. Full circle, creating the foundation for whatever would come next. As the sun broke over the eastern shore, illuminating Clearwater in golden light, I remembered standing in almost this exact spot 2 years earlier, the night before Richard's planned ribbon cutting. I had whispered a promise to my father then. "Tomorrow, we take it back. For you, for me." We had done that, and so much more. We had not only reclaimed what was rightfully mine, but transformed it into something that served a greater purpose, preserving traditional skills, building a community of makers, and demonstrating that success could be measured in more than profit margins and market share. The ribbon cutting that never happened had given way to countless meaningful moments. Students completing their first projects, craftspeople sharing techniques passed down through generations, corporate teams discovering the power of collaborative creation, and young scholarship recipients finding confidence through developing tangible skills. As I walked back toward the lodge, where early risers were already gathering for morning workshop sessions, I passed the spot where Judge Monroe had delivered her ruling. In place of Richard's ceremonial stage now stood a handcrafted sign that welcomed visitors to Clearwater Artisan Retreats. Carved into its base were words I had chosen carefully, words that captured both Clearwater's philosophy and the lesson at the heart of my journey. "What we build with integrity stands the test of time." It was true of my father's craftsmanship, of the lodge he had created board of the business I had developed from his foundation, and of the character forged through protecting what matters most. The greatest victory had not been Richard's public humiliation, satisfying as that moment had felt, but the enduring triumph of authenticity over pretense, of patient creation over hasty acquisition. As students began arriving for the day's workshops, I greeted them with the quiet confidence of someone who had learned firsthand that justice doesn't always arrive in expected ways, that loss can lead to unexpected gains, and that standing firm for what you believe in, even when facing seemingly insurmountable opposition, creates a foundation upon which something truly meaningful can be built. In the workshop, Mason was already setting up for his advanced joinery class, laying out tools with the careful precision of someone who understands that preparation is an essential part of craftsmanship. "Morning, Olivia," he called as I entered. "Ready for another day of building?" I smiled, recognizing the double meaning in his question. "Always," I replied. "That's what we do here." And in that simple exchange lay the essence of Clearwater's legacy, a commitment to building with purpose, integrity, and an eye toward what endures. The ribbon had never been cut, but something far more significant had been created in its place.